Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for the STRIDER Professional Development Webinar Series. Tonight, we're going to be talking about equine business growth through tech. I am Tara Swersie. I'm the CEO of STRIDER. We've got an excellent lineup of speakers tonight to speak with you all. We've got Juliana Chapman, who is the founder of the Tech Equestrian, which explores changes through technology for the equestrian world. Many of you have seen her blog, read a lot of the articles that she's written on the blog, and learned a great deal through it. So we're looking forward to hearing what she's got to say tonight. She's got over 15 years of experience in the tech industry and event marketing, as well as a great deal of background in the equestrian sport. We've also got Nicole Lakin, who many of you know as the CEO and founder of BarnManager, the barn management software, which is also the official barn management software for the United States Equestrian Federation. So when she's not busy running a software company, she's also working as a technology consultant for many of the equestrian businesses in the Florida and New York areas. So she'll have a lot of insights into both the tactical and the strategic aspects of tech of the industry. And last but certainly not least, we've got Helena Harris, who is the principal and founder of Sparkle and Boom Marketing and Communications. That's the home of the podcast that many of you are familiar with, the Stall and Stable podcast, and she's the executive producer and host of that. So if you've not yet had a chance to listen to that podcast, highly recommend it. She's got some very entertaining guests that she's interviewed over time on that podcast. Very much worth tuning into. So take that a look when you can. She's been involved with horses for the better part of 25 years. She's been involved with Bit of Britain, Horse Radio Network, and countless horse businesses throughout the US. So welcome tonight. We're glad to have you all here to speak with everyone. A few admin notes before we go into everything. Questions, professional development webinar. So totally fine to ask questions. If you haven't had a chance to already submit them with the online form, fine to ask them throughout the webinar as we go through. The way you'll do it is, if you're not familiar yet, there's a chat button in your lower menu of your Zoom interface. You're going to chat them to Natasha Springers-Levine. She is our Chief Operating Officer at STRIDER, and she's going to be facilitating the question and answer session for STRIDER. So as you have questions as the speakers are going through, we're not going to do it in real time. We're going to have 15 minutes of Q&A at the end, but just ask those questions as they come to you, and we'll go through them systematically at the end. But again, there's no question too silly or too inane. That's why you're here. You're all here to learn. You've got these experts on the webinar, so make sure you take the time to ask them. You'll notice everybody's on mute. That's because we've got about 70 people registered this evening. So to eliminate the background noise, everyone's been muted. So please do keep things on mute while you're listening to everyone. If you have any problems with interference as you're listening to people, or any problems with the audio, take your cell phones, socially distance them. Move them 6 feet away from your computers, turn them to airplane mode. That'll stop the interference with your computer. So socially distance is something that's going away, but for your cell phones and your computers, it's okay to have them socially distanced tonight, okay? And with that, let's go ahead and get started. One of the things that we've been talking about throughout the horse industry is a little bit of the evolution of the horse industry. And so tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about how the technologies come into the horse industry, where it's being used, and where we see it going towards. There's been a quote that someone had mentioned a few weeks ago that compared to other industries, the rate of technology adoption in the horse world is 8 times as quickly right now because of COVID, meaning everyone's running to technology. We're used to mucking out horse stalls, we're used to riding the horses, we're used to signing pieces of paper, but now we're just adopting technology. And other people are saying, well, I'm not seeing it quite as much. So I'd like to start off with about a 75,000 foot level of what each one of the speakers is seeing from their different perspectives about the rate of tech adoption in the industry and within the different businesses. So let's start. Nicole, you've got a really unique perspective here. You've got your perspective, you're running a software company, BarnManager, you're dealing with developers, you're also dealing with customers. Then you've also got a lot of technical exposure with businesses really on the ground when you're working as a strategic consultant. What have you been seeing as far as the trends of technology in the industry, and where do you think it's headed?
Thank you so much, Tara, and thank you for including me in tonight's discussion. I'm really excited. From the perspective of my work with BarnManager, there is no doubt that there was a huge jump in technology adoption from the perspective of using technology to try and improve the sort of workflows and day-to-day record keeping, scheduling, things like that in the barn. That was partly because I think there's a new need for things like, making sure that only 2 clients were at the barn at one time, and those kind of things that weren't really that big of a consideration before. I think people also did have a lot more time on their hands when all the shows got canceled.
Right.
And they were all of a sudden sitting at their computers for the first time, kind of with the time to test the things they had been thinking about testing for a long time. I also think from that perspective, we've all been kind of forced to embrace technology on the healthcare side of things with everything going on with COVID, everything from trying to get a sign up for a vaccination to just trying to stay up to date on information and connect with your healthcare providers. So that definitely helped some of the people who are a little more resistant to adopting technology in the barn to feel like a little bit more comfortable to maybe try something new. And then I would say from the sort of other hat that I wear, it's kind of been a mixed bag. There's definitely more interest in bringing technology into the equation, but not necessarily any less hesitation from the perspective of security and learning something new, and convincing other people that they should use this new thing as well. So you still see some of the same holdbacks that we've always had, and that every new product, technology or not, kind of faces, especially in this industry where people care so much about the products and services that they're using for their horses. And I do think overall, I'd say there's definitely been a higher rate of acceptance and higher interest in actually going out and pursuing technology rather than waiting for it to come to you.
Are you optimistic that that trend of being willing to explore the fringes of potentially branching out in the brand loyalty and seeing some of the new technology is going to continue past COVID?
I am optimistic, mostly because I still, even being founder, CEO, whatever, I still have a lot of like high touch with our leads, with our existing clients, and what I'm seeing is that they're doing the homework. They're going out, they're looking at everything that's on the market, they're doing the comparisons, they're doing a lot of the work that as consumers in other aspects of our life, we've already been doing, because having access to the internet allows us to do that more easily. But they're doing it in the context of products and services for their horses and for their barns and for their clients and for their businesses. So to me, that's a pretty good indicator that this is not just a short-lived trend, that this is a new behavior that's becoming a little bit more widespread.
That's excellent. That's a good trend to see, because you're right. It's a lifestyle change that they're making, and they're committing to learning about that lifestyle change, and that will carry over into every area.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Helena, you might be able to speak a little bit about this lifestyle change that Nicole was referencing as well, because you're seeing this from your experience when you're working with your business. Give us some insight. I know you've got a process for how you go in and you look a little bit about how the businesses are using different pillars. Are you seeing the pillar of technology in the businesses that you're working with? And give us, all the listeners, a little insight into exactly how your business works on the ground with the various equestrian businesses.
I'm absolutely seeing barn owners in particular embrace technology where they maybe were a little afraid of it before or didn't have the time to work with it before. COVID has done that. It's pushed us into a place where we have to look at different ways of doing things. And so when I go in to work with a barn owner or a business owner, the first thing that I do is I talk about workflow. This is huge. And it's a holdover from my days in the software industry, where you had to map out your day-to-day steps in getting a particular job done, and then identifying the steps that are bottlenecks, and then how do we solve those bottlenecks? So what does your process look like? Can we relieve your pain points? Can we relieve those bottlenecks with a process change, or can we do so with technology? And COVID has been a huge pain point that everybody can see. Oh, they don't need to stop and take a look at their workflow. They can say, all right, wait a minute, my business has come to a grinding halt. These are my pain points. These are my bottlenecks. I can't communicate with my customers because I'm not seeing them every day. So how can I get around that? Well, let's get everybody on a group chat. Let's move to some messaging app that's private. Or, you know what? My farm is big enough and I can have people here who can be socially distant and they can work with their horses. So I can see them in person live. I can love them. I can be grateful that they're walking through my door, but I still can't I can't do any transactions. I can't engage with them. So now we move to things like registering for events or lessons online. So now technology comes into play at another part of their workflow. So I think COVID has been a huge driving force in identifying the bottlenecks, whereas before a barn owner might not have actually taken the time to look at where her pain points were. So that's, to me, that's the most important part is don't just adopt technology for technology's sake. Find out where you need it and then go shopping for a specific product that will solve your problem.
And that shopping pulls in a lot of that customer research that Nicole's talking about as well. So it makes
Exactly.
sense. You had a fantastic quote on a webinar you did for us a couple of weeks ago, where you talked about every equestrian business needs to have a business plan. And you described a little bit of the vacant stare that you get when you talk about that sometimes. Are you seeing a little bit more of the business plan having a technology pillar and them understanding that there needs to be an accounting pillar and a financial pillar and things like that? Are you seeing that technology pillar come into the discussions initiated by the customers? It's still a work in progress.
No, that's a big fat no.
Okay.
You know, I either get a blank stare or dry heaves. You know, it's still it's
Okay. That's why we're
still
here.
not quite there. Although I would say the next generation of professionals, I'm going to call them equestrian professionals because it's not just barn owners. The next generation of professionals, they're native users. They grew up with technology, so it's not so much of a foreign conversation. But a lot of existing business owners who are struggling to pivot, as they say, in the business world and survive COVID or perhaps grow their business or even just strengthen it so they can survive whatever's coming next. They don't necessarily believe that planning something on paper or planning something out is that beneficial. So that's a hard battle for me to fight, but I keep doing it. But so it's kind of an umbrella problem, and then how we squeeze technology in there. You know, I'm out there selling this stuff. Like, I want to make your life easier. Your life can be easier. I say, you know, running a barn doesn't have to be painful.
Right.
It doesn't. And so they're listening now. I do think that, again, because of COVID and also because different business owners are more connected than they used to be. We have social media, we've got instant messaging, we've got Instagram. We're seeing what other businesses in our niche are doing, right? And so when we hear or when we communicate with someone else that one of our business peers is making use of technology and they're making good use of it, well, now we start to look at that. So this word of mouth thing that is very important in our industry, it's critical. Like, horse people don't do anything unless another horse person tells them to do it. And so that's happening faster, more efficiently, using technology, using the internet. And I think because of that, the battle that I'm fighting to introduce tech into the business planning process is getting a little bit easier. I will say that.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk in a deep dive later on in this webinar a little bit about some of those specific tools that you've been finding that have worked better for some businesses than others. But I want to talk a little bit about as those businesses are coming in their tech with Juliana, who's got a lot of perspective as the Tech Equestrian blog. You interview companies all the time. You probably have the best 100,000 foot level of the entire industry of seeing all these different companies, these apps, these different products come in to say, let me solve these problems that Helena's seeing across the board. Let me give you time savers. Let me give you all these apps. What are you seeing from your perspective as you've been talking to these various companies, as you've been assessing the state of the industry?
Yeah, well, Tara, thank you so much. Thank you, Strider, for putting this program on. It's really an exciting time to be in, obviously, not only the horse world, but the horse tech world. And Nicole can attest to this as well. There is so much opportunity and so many ways that tech can help save time, money, help the health of our horses, have happy riders, etc. And it's so exciting to just be able to interview and hear from the providers out there, and a lot of the new tech that's coming out. And it's a range. It's online software. It's wearables. There's some really exciting things happening in the vet space as well that I'll share. But they come from, a lot of people come from the tech background and have pain points, and because we're so, we've got tech around us in the consumer world, they're adapting what they learned from that into the horse world. So it's great to see that, and I know they work hard at perfecting it and understanding the pain points that horse owners have, and trainers and riders. So I think, like I said, and the other thing I do mention to a lot of people, and I write in my blog, is that the tech adoption, especially with our industry, it's really a journey. It's not a destination. I mean, there's so much happening, and look at the consumer world, look at Apple, and every year they come out with a new iPhone. So it's always evolving, it's always changing. So it can be a little overwhelming. It can be, you can kind of feel like you're behind the 8 ball, but know that we have such a great community. I mean, that's the great thing too, is that the horse community is very tight knit, and there's a lot of word of mouth, as Helena mentioned. So that's good. It's good and bad, but it's great that we can leverage each other. And there's a lot of new providers out there that can also help answer your questions even before you purchase a subscription or buy a smart halter, things like that. So it's like I said, it's really exciting to be a part of the industry right now.
Are you seeing particular areas of the industry that tech-wise, you mentioned the wearables, you find that that's growing really quickly right now? Or are they pretty much all just kind of popping up, like depending on who's there and who's kind of pushing it and where their background is? And
yeah, that's I think there's also, I want to say on the wearable front, there's always trepidation, right? You're going to put a halter on my horse 24/7. What? And I'm
all
going
those
to be able
business, right?
and I'm going to be able to, see all their movements and get data back. And how do I interpret that data? So that's a whole other element, probably a separate segment. But at the same time, because we don't feel as connected to our animals as before. I mean, I think there is a lot of interest there. I know that Night Watch is doing really well. They have a fantastic product. So definitely worth checking out. There's also on the vet side, I don't know if you're aware, this is a Swiss company that came out last year. It's called Pia Vida. And they actually have a wearable that vets buy. So if a vet comes and visits your horse and it's got some type of an issue, they actually, it's almost like a girth that they put around the horse, and there's a sensor and a device on the horse. So when the vet leaves the stall, they're going to get all this data and they can monitor that horse remotely. So not only does that help in COVID times, but it just helps overall, because our horses always act different when a vet's in the stall.
Right.
So and they actually just came out with another product for breeding, like they can actually predict using the sensors and the artificial intelligence that your mare is going to be, give birth within a few hours. So it's just, there's so much great stuff out there, and it's worth definitely checking out.
And it's interesting too, because you've got this tech that makes the whole personality and subjectivity anonymized. I know you're going to go into this a little bit later with your survey, but it takes that personal feeling of like, I feel like the horse is upset, and just tells the vet
exactly
measurements whether or not the horse is actually upset. Yep. Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you again all for being on with us tonight. We're going to get into the nitty gritty, which is what everyone's here to learn about. So let's talk a little bit about what we've seen, a little bit of the strategic stuff, the companies that are coming in, the trends in the companies. We talked a little bit about on the ground, what the pain points are, the businesses. and a little bit of what we're seeing with the various users adopting and being more comfortable with user interfaces. Let's talk a little bit about what exactly are the tech services and tools that we think that businesses can adopt and look at right now in order to grow their businesses. Are we looking at stuff like adaptive email marketing like Bed Bath & Beyond? Or is it, oh, we need to have Wi-Fi towers at all of our horse shows? It depends on who you talk to. You know, some of the venues that we talk to say, we would love to have X, Y, and Z technology, but we don't even have internet. So how are we going to have technology if we don't have internet? And so you wind up with all these different obstacles. And Nicole can probably talk a little bit to this as well, and Helena, some of the venues and some of the customers in the horse world say, I don't support online banking. I'm going to continue to drive my paper checks to the bank and deposit them manually. So Juliana, you've explored, I think, some of this on your blog quite a bit. Do you have a sense of what the critical enablers are that you're seeing across the patterns? Would you have two or three that you could talk to?
I would definitely focus in on the online banking, or what they call the digital wallet. That's really kind of a lot of the trends I'm seeing, not only in the horse space, but overall the consumer space. There's a few vendors, horse tech providers that leverage that. I don't know if you're familiar with HorseLink, but they do a lot with digital payments. They use a company called Stripe, and Stripe is actually leveraged by Amazon, and Uber. So it's kind of the where we should be, because basically it's almost like two camps, right? Or two target audiences that we're dealing with is we've got the digital natives. So they've really, the young riders, the juniors who are born with their, smartphone in their hand. And then you have kind of the middle to later age folks who were kind of both worlds. And then, obviously the later. And we're just so used to having that instant gratification and instant feeling of, okay, I just want to get this done now, and can I just pay with my phone? Mm-hmm. Or can I just, just make it happen like that? So I think it's really important for anybody who has a business in the horse world to think about that. And they've gotten much more secure with all of these products. So I know that HorseLink got their start because the owner was a braider, and she was tired of not getting her cash or her check, or things were missing or whatever. So, and again, like I said in the beginning, like a lot of these products come from people that do all this work that everybody's familiar with, but they have a tech background, so they leverage that. And then there's also I met the owners of Heels Down, and that's actually a digital online riding lesson program, and you book your lessons online, which, revolutionary, right? Why haven't we been doing this for like 10, 15 years? Why am I still paying cash for my lesson and not knowing when I'm really gonna, like, what time do you need me there, and who else am I riding with, and what horse am I gonna ride? Well, they digitized the whole process. So, and they did it because they were a young couple, they wanted to go riding, and they weren't really aware of kind of all the nuances with riding. So they went to pay, and they didn't have cash or a check.
And so they said, we need a different solution here.
And the husband actually has a tech background, so he created the app, and they've kind of gone from there. But again, it's really, and the cool part is, I don't know if you guys have a chance to check out their website, but they also have trainer and horse reviews, so you can review how well the trainer was, or we've never really had that, right? Peer reviews digitally online. Again, such a great idea, and hopefully it'll take off and do wonders. But that's kind of where we should be thinking about, is just how to make it easy, leveraging what's available, and then the the online banking, I think is critical.
So one of the things you touched on a little bit is like people feel these pain points in the digital payments. And I know Nicole's explored a lot of those user experience pain points with BarnManager, trying to figure out like, what are people dealing with every single day and how do we bring technology in? And I know, Nicole, I think you've got online digital payments with BarnManager as well. So I'm hearing a lot about digital payments, which I think we all are supportive of across the board for any business, whether or not it's a horse business or a restaurant or whatever. Online payments certainly work. What are you seeing from your perspective as far as the critical enablers? I mean, you've got your perspective as a software CEO, but you're also seeing some stuff on the ground. You were just showing down in Wellington, you're still an active equestrian. What do you think are some of the critical enablers from a tech perspective?
You know, I think that anytime that you're looking at any kind of technology as a solution, it's really important. I think Helena touched on this earlier, but to really understand all of the pain points and the context of the pain points and how the pain points are impacting different stakeholders in different ways before you define specifically what the technology that's going to fit that need would look like. And one of the things I believe, Tara, you and I spoke about was like, you know, horse shows investing a ton of money to have a big, beautiful website or online orders or videos or whatnot, but not having Wi-Fi available at their show, and everybody's, you know, trying to access everything through their data plans, and it's just a complete mess. So that's a sort of funny example, but it plays into the bigger picture of technology solutions as a whole, and understanding what, not just what people are telling you that they need, but really hearing them. I'm trying to remember a good example, and I'm struggling a little bit, but I do have a lot of people that come to me on the consulting side and just say, you know, I want to build an application to do X. And when you when you really get down to it and understanding what it is they're trying to solve, things like digital payments and payment processing, that solves so many pain points for so many people that it's a no-brainer. And there are so many major corporations that have invested tons of resources to build out really great solutions that we can use in this industry and are used across, you know, industries around the globe. Stripe is one example. We also are using that for our payment processing, and it's really fantastic. The holdouts are eventually going to give in because some things.
You and Juliana are both positive. It's good.
It's inevitable. I mean, some things I think consumers kind of force, and other things like shows lose so much money by only accepting, you know, checks and cash and whatnot. So those shows just can't survive that way. So that's kind of inevitable to me. But from the perspective of other questions and other people who say, I have this really great idea for an app, I always push them back to really look at what it is they're really trying to solve for, who they're solving for, how much switching cost there is from whatever they're doing already. With BarnManager, the majority of people we work with are using pen and paper. So truthfully, for records for horses that cost more than most people's homes, and their health records there's an individual copy that's handwritten and in a binder in an office. And you know, when you're at a horse show and your horse has some kind of injury and the vet there says, well, you know, what's the horse's history? A lot of BarnManagers are amazing and have a lot of it stored in their heads, but it makes it very challenging for those hardworking BarnManagers to ever take a vacation in their lifetime. So something like taking the time to snap photos of those paper records and store them in a place where you can pull them up on your phone anytime you need them, and then slowly transitioning into just creating the digital record. That's just one example of how we kind of try to take the time to really understand not just what the problem is that we were solving, but what people were doing, you know, prior to using something like BarnManager, and how we could make it worth their time and their energy transition and invest in something new. But taking a step back for a second, again, for my sort of consultant hat, when somebody comes to me and says, I want to build an app for something, I generally say, like, building something custom it should be your absolute last resort. It has so many unforeseen costs and challenges and things. And a lot of times, if you do the work to understand the problem, and you do the work to understand the people and what their context is, what their where it is that they're having the problem, things like that, and then you take some time to see what's out there. Usually there's something either off the shelf or semi-custom that can do the job very well. So I apologize that I kind of jumped around there a little bit, but I hope I answered your question.
Absolutely. No, you made some excellent points. And I think talking about the pain points and not necessarily reinventing the wheel is an excellent point. And it's one that I think, you know, it cross-pollinates what Juliana was saying about, like, there's stuff out there that's really good. If you do your research, you're going to find it. You don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel each and every time.
Absolutely. And I would just add that now that people are a little more open to trying some of these new things, it falls on us, the companies that have already developed a product that are out there, and the entrepreneurs who have done the homework and feel like there's an opportunity for them to fill a gap, to build a product that actually meets those needs in the right way, to find the product market fit. So to go to the right people with your product, not the people who you assume want to use it, but the people who actually, you know, show engagement and interest. That then falls a little bit on the developer of the company, of the product, to do their part to meet you in the middle. So it's not all on the consumer, and that's why some companies succeed and some don't. But this opportunity of people being more open and interested puts the onus a little bit back too on the creators.
To be receptive to that, to basically understand what their audience is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I want to go back just a moment. What you just said just reminded me a little bit of what Juliana was talking about these new ideas coming out. Juliana, are you seeing, as the ideas come to you and you're interviewing them, a lot of these, I think you mentioned, are less than 3 years old. Some of them are a year old. Some of them are just a few months old. Are you seeing the same degree of, I don't want to call it cognitive awareness, but just recognition of what Nicole's talking about a little bit about where the customers are at and where the pain points are? Or are they, is it still sort of this, like, you know, Silicon Valley 15 years ago, great ideas coming out and there's a great opportunity and we're all going to, you know, go out and solve the world? What are you feeling when you interview them?
So great question. And I actually just recently put together a survey called How Techie Are You? And I put that on my blog and I promoted it via social. And I asked people, I actually listed the 6 main barn management apps, and close to 50% were not aware of any of them. So we have all these great solutions. I think it's just the awareness and the education and feeling comfortable. And then in addition to that, I asked, well, how would you educate people on horse tech? And the top 2 reasons, they literally were tied, was blog, social media. That was kind of like one category. And then trainer, rider recommended, the other. So, I mean, not surprising, right? And it's not easy to do. But I just thought that was pretty telling. And a lot of my survey respondents were fairly young. And I wouldn't, you know, I would think they'd have a lot more awareness of the apps in the horse tech space. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
It did very well. Thank you. I think one of the interesting items, you probably know this more than anyone as a professional marketing person, is how much companies spend on marketing after they've established the brand to keep awareness. I heard one quote that a software company should plan on spending as much on marketing as they did on initial development. And that number, you know, I can see Nicole's eyes going up, and my eyes certainly went up when I saw that number. And they said, if you're not spending that much money on marketing, that's the reason that Nike's out there. That's the reason the Super Bowl has the Super Bowl ads, and they're all from established companies, is because they're still spending that money on brand awareness, market penetration, and getting out there and seeing all this stuff and just getting it in front of them and in front of them and in front of them. And marrying those two pictures of, here's a critical enabler, and how do we get it from you hearing about this great idea to Nicole seeing people actually using it, and Helena talking to them about it, and then being receptive to adopting it because they're a new business and they're like, yes, I know that these are 3 critical enabling tools. I need to have digital payment solution, whether that's PayPal, Stripe. I'm not going to recommend Venmo because of different reasons that I don't think Venmo is right for a scalable business. But having this sort of digital payment solutions. So Helena, you probably have some stories, just some great stories about critical enablers that you've been able to see on the ground. I don't know, have you been able to see the digital payments work for some of your clients? What are you seeing are the top 2 or 3 enablers that are working for your clients?
I can boom, boom, boom. I can tell you right off the top of my head. Definitely it's digital payments. There's a lot of money that's left on the table when you have to chase down checks. And there's a lot of bad blood that can be created when you have to chase down people who have the checks. So there's a sort of a customer service issue that comes along with chasing payments down. So digital payments is a big one. The time management is a big one. Online calendars. There's a software app called Acuity, which is great for booking appointments and scheduling. I think every riding instructor should have it. It's $15 a month. It is so worth the time saving and the mental energy that it saves for business owners. So digital payments, time management, and then communications. And communications can be very broad. But one of the most important things, again, we're going back to boarding and training businesses because that's who I work with the most, but one of the most important things for a healthy, happy barn that can also be the livelihood for a barn owner is good communication between the barn owner, her staff, anyone who's putting a hand on the horse owners. So how to facilitate communication so that everyone's on the same page. Everyone has accessibility. They can access whatever's going on in the barn, whether it be riding opportunities, clinics, critical information about whether or not the barn is open, the well-being of the horse, et cetera. So those 3 areas, I think, are critical because we all put the priority, we all put the horse in the front and center of our minds, right? We can't do anything without these horses. So what's critical to their care? Really good communication between all of the people who are involved in their care. How do I run my business? How do I not get burnt out? Well, you manage your time properly. There's a work-life balance that we all need to make sure we have. Time management is key to that. And then digital payment, that's your cash coming in. There's no reason to chase paper. I had this very conversation on Saturday night, and I was pulling my hair out because the trainer I was talking to said the processing fees were too much. They were too expensive. She couldn't afford to sacrifice X amount of her revenue, right? 2%, 2.9% of her revenue. And I said, go home and I want you to think about that. Now she brings in a lot of money because she's dealing with some very high-end horses. So I think it came to like $15,000 a year. I said, how much would you have to pay someone full-time to keep track of your money, your books? What does it cost you to work with an accountant? How much time do you spend doing this financial stuff yourself? And then how much do you charge per hour? You're losing billable hours. For every hour you spend chasing payments, that's an hour that you could be billing somebody, whether you're riding a horse, teaching a lesson, or consulting or shopping for a client. So, and it goes back to this 4th point, which it's not exactly tech, but it kind of is. And that's a financial spreadsheet. Something as simple as, Microsoft Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheets. There's free, spreadsheet programs that are out there. Putting your numbers down, putting your expenses in one column and your revenue in another, and understanding what's coming in versus what's going out financially will help you really figure out which of those things can you afford that $15,000, right? And when you compare what you're spending to the billable hours that you're creating by saving all that time, and you put that into this little spreadsheet, there's your answer. That does the convincing for you. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It's
Okay.
a valuable point, because it's really the opportunity cost of doing it your old way, your paper-based way, or doing it slightly potentially scarier way, because it's hard to adopt new things and learn new skills and stuff like that. But you're leaving money on the table if you continue to do it the paper-based way, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yep.
What I've heard from all of you is, the digital payments, whether it's Stripe or PayPal, the time management. I think that's one of the things I've always been impressed with the BarnManager software, is how much time it's saving, because you're able to, as Nicole pointed out, you're able to get that communication over to the vets and over to the people who take care of your horses, because it's all digitized, it's all out there. You've got the ability to manage your customer and your brand better if you've got communication. And I know you've got some tools that you mentioned that you found worked better than others for communication. I think you talked a little bit about Slack and a common Gmail calendar. I know you mentioned Acuity as far as time management. Were there any other communication software tools that you had mentioned that you tend to find more successful than others?
Again, it all depends on how you communicate with your staff and with your clients. Some people use group texting, which is very private. Others use social media. Some will direct message on Instagram. That's not always the most efficient. So it really depends, because every barn is different. So their workflow is different. Again, you need to go back to, where are my clients? Where do they spend the most time? What's easiest for me? What's easiest for all of us to use? And then, it could be WhatsApp, it could be Facebook Messenger, it could be, if everybody's got an iPhone, iMessage tends to be helpful. So you have to evaluate before you invest in that
People, process, and
technology.
technology, making sure they all come together, and you're not picking a communication tool that doesn't work for the people you're communicating with.
Yeah, I spent the first part of my career was in software development, and I'm on like this, I feel like I'm on a mission to educate everybody. Technology in and of itself is not good or bad. It is simply there to solve a problem or to take a place of a step in a process. And so you're not going to love it, and you're not going to hate, you're not going to feel anything about it until you identify the process and that missing step that technology needs to fill. And you're going to get sick of hearing if you have me on more webinars, my God, if you ever invite me back, I will say this again and again and again.
It's valuable points. It's valuable points. And that missing step, I think, is where we're going to head to next, because we're getting a little bit onto the Q&A stuff. So I want to talk a little bit about, we've talked a bit about what works well. I've heard the digital payments, I've heard the accounting, the time management, the communication. I know a couple folks have chimed in with Intuit QuickBooks, which also works well if you're ready to take that type of software on. It does have a little bit of a learning curve, but with COVID, you're able to set aside some time and get familiar with it. We've talked about doing a webinar just on Intuit QuickBooks for equestrians. So if that is a professional development area you're interested in, make sure you send a note to Natasha, and we will get that on the calendar. But I want to talk a little bit about those missing steps and those treads on the staircase. We have a couple minefields out there for technology that doesn't work. Nicole touched on this a little bit when she talked about, like, I woke up this morning and I decided just to build an app, and the app was going to be the best thing ever, and it's going to be so easy, and I'm going to build it in a weekend, and I'm going to make a lot of money, and I'll never have to maintain it because it's going to be this most perfect app that I'm going to build with my cousin. And how that's a minefield. Juliana, I know you also had a couple minefields as well. Let's start with Nicole. A little bit about the minefields. What are some technology areas to avoid that you don't recommend for equestrian businesses?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think investing time in something, I think it comes down to prioritizing. So prioritizing what your needs are understanding what your options are to meet those needs, and then kind of getting a sense of what the investment, both financially and time-wise, are for you to learn how to use that new tool and learn and actually integrate it into your full team, your full process, etc. To build on something Helena mentioned earlier, just a few minutes ago, these are just tools, and they're only as good as what you put into them. Garbage in is garbage out. So you can find the best application, the best wearable, the best whatever on the planet, but if you're not using it well, it's a complete waste of time and money. So being able to sit down and prioritize what are the needs that you need to fill most urgently, and that require the least amount of resources to fill or to meet the needs of. And there might be things down at the bottom of the list that you just really, really want, but they have such a huge upfront investment, whether it's, again, time is your most valuable thing that you have. So you might be just thinking about, oh, it's only $15 a month, or it's only this. But if it's going to take you 20 hours to learn how to use it, and then convince the rest of your team to use it, and then have to teach them all how to use it, that's a huge investment.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
I think for everybody, it's going to be different things. If your brain looks at Excel and gets it, and Excel can solve so many problems for you, and it is free. So, I mean, that's the kind of thing that, maybe the needs that it's filling are like slightly lower on the priority list, but you can get it up and running tomorrow without, putting too much effort or money into it. Those are the kind of things from my perspective that makes sense to spend the time and money on. Whereas the things that are going to cost you the most, you kind of put away for a rainy day down the road. And that also gives those areas time to continue to develop and evolve, and maybe meet you in the middle. So if it's something, okay, QuickBooks is never going to be easy to learn, because it does so much, and it does it very well. But there are some things that are going to become more user-friendly, that are going to become more intuitive over time. So by identifying that right now, that's going to take you too much time and energy to incorporate, you're also maybe giving that company, that product, that problem, more time to be solved by the people, the creators, the innovators, people trying to solve it.
More time for them to innovate and evolve whatever solution they've got on the thing because what you're pointing out is there's both the financial investment, but there's also the time investment. And what Helena was talking a little bit about was the intellectual investment of learning something.
Right.
Juliana, do you have particular minefields, touching on what Nicole's just talked about, hey, you're seeing these new things come out on the market. Are you seeing certain areas that when they first start, they're a little bit too raw, or certain areas that you'd say, hey, we're going to hold off on recommending this to half the businesses I talk to?
Yeah, definitely. It's a great question. Definitely what to avoid. One thing I'm hearing, and it tends to come with the new vendors, brand new to the scene, is they want to be the one-stop shop. They want to do it all. Keep in mind, Amazon only sold books in the beginning.
Excellent point.
It's like, I love these, again, I love their ideas. I love the passion, and they want to be able to handle it all. Everything from horse care to communicating, to saving money, to this and that. And Nicole knows it's not easy having all those features. But I love a company that comes in, has a great foundation, great ideas, and then builds off of what's successful. So it gets back to prioritizing, knowing how to differentiate yourself. I'm wearing my marketing hat. Knowing your story. We're not the best at everything.
Right.
You can try to be, and that's great. But kind of pick your foundational elements and the value you can bring to your customers. So that's something that I've seen a lot of. Again, I really enjoy hearing and sharing what their vision is. So that's been great. But I also wanted to kind of touch on what Helena had mentioned. There are a lot of free horse tech tools out there. I'm not sure if people are aware, but there is a Go Horse, and they're pulling together, it's a national directory. If you have a stable or a training facility. You can post there for free. You just upload an image, put together a description, and you're there. I also spoke with the team from Pegasus app. They have some great ideas. Really excited for that. It's a community-based app. They're going to do a lot with social media, pulling together all the resources within the horse community. They're actually offering people a free business broadcast. They're looking at it from like the web, from video, from that standpoint, almost like a YouTube for horse people. And they're, you send in a video, they'll help you produce it and make it work. So that's exciting. I love ideas like that. How we can help each other, especially in the early days of tech. And then there's also BarnWiz. The creator of BarnWiz, she never left her stable for 5 years. She eventually was like, I need to go on vacation. I'm one to help, clean the stalls and take care of my horses. So she developed an app that that pulls together horse owners, barn owners, with people that are available to help in that respect. So again, that's a free service. You can upload that.
So
there's some great opportunities there.
Take advantage of the market opportunities that are free, that have defined value and defined purpose. Avoid the ones that are going to simultaneously launch the space shuttle while taking care of your horse.
Can I chime in on this for a second?
Absolutely.
I mean, most of us have Gmail accounts, and whether you're an Apple user or a PC user or iPhone or Droid, if you have a Gmail account, it's worth it to take a few minutes or an hour and look at what comes with that Gmail account. There is a suite of services, technology services that come with Google that mirror the paid stuff. And if you're usually it's free, like if you want to use Google Business or Google Drive for Business, then it's a paid service. But up to a certain level, for the small business owner or the solopreneur, Google has a lot of options that are free, and they integrate fairly easily with industry standard software like Excel. So Google has something called Google Sheets, and you can download the data from that into an Excel spreadsheet and vice versa. It doesn't always work perfectly, but it's free. And since most people have a Gmail account, it's easy to start connecting with other people in our industry using that platform. So that's just one example of something that's free. We think it's just email, but it is really a lot more.
I would just add to that too, if you do decide to play around with the paid version, I'm still discovering things every day that are come as part of that. For some of my clients, prototyping is very important anytime you're building anything. So if anybody has any interest in building any kind of tech solution, build low fidelity prototypes right off the bat, which means build something that doesn't cost you much time or energy to make, that you can put in front of someone and can communicate what you're trying to build one day with your grand vision. Anyway, I didn't even know Google Sites existed, which is literally a platform where you can build web applications.
Yeah.
With some clicking and dragging.
No idea.
It's unbelievable. And I work with a lot of people that are not comfortable with technology. All I had to do was send them a link to their private website that I built for them that has all the buttons that they ever need to press. So to build on Helena's point, there's so much out there that even us self-proclaimed technology nerds don't even know is out there yet. So
fantastic points. Absolutely fantastic. And I'm also thrilled that all three of you stayed on the positive. These are the great things about the world of technology. It's so quick for us to go down into and this is bad and this is bad, but all of you just said, no, these are fantastic things. And I really appreciate those positive ideas there. That's fantastic. So with that, we are short on time. So we are going to switch over. Thank you all for speaking and sharing your thoughts tonight. We could easily just keep going for 4 more hours, easily. We could spend just an hour on each one of these questions. But I know that a lot of the attendees had some questions that they were chiming in on. So I want to give them an opportunity to get their questions and hear from you all. Natasha, I'm going to switch it over to you. So you have a chance to kind of go there. I think you should be good to go. There you go.
Yeah, thank you everyone for submitting such great questions. The chat was very active throughout, so that was actually really fun. It's a whole different aspect of this. So one question that came through, and this sort of goes back to the digital payments and the apps that have integrated or partnered with digital payments. So Juliana, you mentioned HorseLink. Why would somebody use HorseLink, or, you know, I'll plug Strider for a minute because Strider also integrated with a payment processor to make that easier for business owners. So why would someone use an app or a web app instead of just getting Stripe or whatever the other payment processor is? What would be the benefit?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, it's more about the platform and what that app provider is giving you. Again, it gets back to what your priorities are. They're leveraging Stripe due to their, and Nicole mentioned this, due to their expertise, you know, and you feel comfortable that if there's a security breach, they're going to handle it. You're not going to have to worry about it. They have that breadth and depth. So it's that comfort of using HorseLink for all the other features, including the payment process, but it's focused on, you know, the attributes of that app. So obviously you have to do a little research on which app you feel comfortable with, and it makes it's like gives you the ability just to focus on your needs versus having to deal with a Stripe directly. I don't know how easy or difficult that is working with them directly, but again, it's kind of melding those two worlds and relying on HorseLink for their expertise, and then leveraging partners to help make it the best experience.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Did anybody else want to chime in on that one? Okay, then we're going to move on to the next one. Great. So the next question, and this I feel like is a great sort of view into what Nicole was mentioning about people meeting in the middle and all of that. So this question is, I feel like I'm on my phone all the time. So having a book to write things down by hand in is great because it's less screen time. If there is an app for barn management or for ride management, that just sort of increases the dependence on a phone or a laptop. What are the sort of advantages and drawbacks of that?
Yeah, I can take this one. You know, an application is not for everyone to replace everything. I will forever be a person who reads physical books. I will never own an e-reader. I just don't like it. It's a great technology. I know people who love them, and they're so much easier to travel with. But I love the feel of a book in my hand, and I love flipping the pages. So that's number one. It's not for everybody. The other, number two, would be kind of a little bit about understanding your pros and cons of, you know, you enjoy more entering this information by hand into a book than you would entering it into a computer or a tablet or a mobile app. But how many cons does that cause? Is it hard for other people to read your handwriting? Do people need to access the information from more than one location? Do you need different levels of access to that information, like permissions levels? You know, what are the repercussions of your choice? So just like we talked about earlier with you know, sort of the garbage in, garbage out, and just because you introduce a tool doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work well for your particular barn or business or situation. Understanding what not making that choice does, I think, is equally as important. So again, there are certain things that you should, if you like doing it the way you've been doing it forever, go on with your bad self. And our philosophy at BarnManager, at least, is that there are so many ways to manage horses well, and to care for horses and to manage your business. We are certainly not here trying to tell you how to do it. We're trying to give you tools to make it easier for you. People who take care of horses are some of the hardest working people in the world. And they have so many hats that they wear all day. So we're trying to build tools for you to use to make that juggling a little bit easier. That said, again, I'm very happy to tell somebody when I don't think that BarnManager is going to be a good fit for them, because it's not meant for everybody. You can't be everything for everyone. Just like as a trainer, you can't be everything for everyone. As a software product or a wearable or any other product, you can't be everything for everyone.
And I think that what's really telling about the question is she says that she feels like she's on her phone all the time. And this is probably one of those answers where we can say technology is not good, because our phones tend to be a dumping ground for everything we need our workflow or our process to do that it's not doing. And that could be we're not communicating clearly enough or often enough with our staff and our clients. It could be because we're not managing our time well enough. So everything kind of gets funneled down into the phone, and then we're stuck. We go down into the rabbit hole of what's on my phone. I think that using paper is okay. I'm going to agree with you here, Nicole. Technology isn't appropriate for everyone and every step in everyone's day. I love paper. I can't remember things. I have ADHD. I cannot remember things unless I write them down. And do I lose those pieces of paper? Yes, but the process of writing them down puts them in a special place in my brain so that I don't completely forget it. And books. I'm also a hard copy book reader. So just because you're doing things on paper doesn't mean that paper is bad or that it's inefficient. But I do think that it begs the question, why are you so dependent on your phone, and why does it stress you out so much? Because I know that feeling, I'm like that. And that just goes back to, again, my point. What's happening in your day to day? What's happening in your workflow with your team? Maybe you need to hire somebody. All right, maybe you can't afford it. What technology then can you go out and invest in that can take the place of another person, or whatever the holes are in your workflow? Just don't feel bad if you do use paper, because it's an alternative to technology that's not working for you.
Yeah, it's a great answer. So there was one more question that snuck in here at the end that I think is really, really interesting. And I think maybe everybody can kind of fit an answer into this one. So do you guys have any sort of ROI proof for barns that have moved their barns from old school paper or whatever other, cumbersome processes to adopting tech?
I can start off with that one a little bit and then let others chime in as well. One of the things that's really important to think about is if you're looking to scale your business, you've got to have a path to be able to scale it. So with STRIDER, we look a lot about how are you reaching people and how are you communicating with them, and what's your email collection. If you're not sending out information that you have either stalls available or a show coming up with entries available or a clinic that you're hosting or some sort of activity where you're bringing in that revenue, if you're not saying thank you to your clients after you've just hosted a clinic somewhere, you're not going to be able to recapture that revenue, going back to what Helena is talking about. So we've seen that barns that switch from paper and go over to digital entries grow their entries by about 47% in the first year. We see their email lists grow 80 to 90%. Why? Because as Helena points out, you're writing stuff down on a piece of paper and you lose them. You don't always remember everybody's email address. I certainly don't remember people's email addresses, and I write them down all the time. So when you start capturing things digitally, you start capturing them efficiently in a way that you can retarget them. So it's a question of what you're looking to do. If you've got 6 horses in your barn and you're only going to have 6 horses in your barn, you're never going to have any shows, you're never going to have more than a couple lessons a week, you're not necessarily looking to scale, and there's not going to be a huge ROI other than your time, as Helena and Juliana were pointing out, investment in capturing what your time worth. But if you're looking to scale, you're looking to get more lessons, you're looking to get more clients, more trained students, more show entries, we see a direct return on investment when you move over to digital. And I'm sure Nicole's got some numbers on the BarnManager of the time savings and the amount of hours of labor that you're saving when you go over to digital. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
And you could even market that to your advantage, that you are digital, and you can wrap in even wearables, C coach, videos, all that kind of stuff. And then you're differentiating, which I mentioned earlier. I see a big opportunity there with that.
That's a really good point. I think, for equine businesses as well, it wasn't, it's how different are you and what are you doing that's really giving you that advantage? Yeah, for sure.
I can honestly, Tara, say that we've done a bad job at quantifying the ROI. It's something that we're trying to do better. But I can say again, one of the things that we're kind of known for is our customer service and the follow-up and the relationship we have once you become a customer. And so we're getting continuous feedback from our customers about what we're doing well, what we're not doing well. And this is something that's very hard to quantify, but the frustration index with certain things, Helena's touched a bunch of times on the importance of good communication and having a centralized place where everyone knows to go to look for information will cut the sort of the frustration index, I'm going to say in half, just because of the amount of people I hear from saying like how much easier it is. So I apologize and regretfully will say that we haven't done the best job in quantifying that, but just knowing that things are always going to be in the place, in the one place where you store them, and that there is a centralized place saves you so much time and energy. I will never forget as a working student having to photocopy the vet book every time we were going away to a show for a couple weeks because we needed to have one copy at home and then one copy on the road, and just like little things like that. The time saving is like endless. So that's
I have one of my clients who, well, first of all, it's difficult to measure ROI because nobody's measuring their investment. They're not using their spreadsheets.
Nobody's doing the I in the first place. Yeah.
The days of, I don't want to know what I'm spending on my horse or horses because then, that's going to be horrible. That's over. So it is difficult to measure ROI. But you can measure it in sort of intangibles, your work-life balance. So I had one client who adopted little pieces of technology in different places. She adjusted her workflow and did a couple of other things, one of which was, let's host clinics. Let's make sure our lessons and events are all processed digitally. It saved time, but it also raised her level of customer service. So the quality of care that she could provide made her stalls more valuable. So we sat down and we said, what do you want? And she said, I want less clients who are a pain in the butt. I said, okay. And she said, but so I said, okay, let's raise your prices. You're offering such quality of service now. You're offering something that the barn down the road can't offer, right? So Juliana's talking about competitive advantage. So little pieces of technology, when plugged into the right place, can lift the level of service that you provide for your horses and your clients, and then you can charge more money. So you're now more in control of how you want your business to scale, because some of us don't necessarily want the business to get bigger, but we want it to shift to something that's more manageable and more rewarding for us. And so the return in this particular case was this woman gets to spend more time with her family. Right? And she sees a gap in her week where she can say, on Thursdays, I just want to save for training rides, no lessons. I don't want to deal with people. I love teaching, but it exhausts me. It takes a lot of my energy. So again, by plugging in the right technology into the right places, her return, it can still be measured, but she just doesn't have the time to do that right now. That's next. We'll work on that later. Does that make sense to you guys? You get that?
I think that's a great way of putting it, because especially in the horse world, things have not been quantified for so long. And so reevaluating that time is perfect, especially for, the collective audience, I think.
One of the metrics I just want to hammer home is when you start cutting down those 15 minutes here and 15 minutes there, whether you're doing the competitive differentiation that Juliana talks about, you're talking about this time saving, you're talking about the quality of life that Helena's talking about, but it adds up to an hour a day, and an hour a day adds up to 2.5 months a year. And that's serious time to go to Bora Bora and just relax. So you've got to be thinking about the quantifiable return on investment from your sanity and the time saving that you have. You can save an hour a day with any bit of workflow change or technology adoption. You're seriously improving your quality of life, and you're seriously improving that time savings. If you're not paying somebody else, whether it's a barn manager, a show secretary, or another human being, you're paying yourself. And that's a great thing to be doing as an individual and as a business owner. So do we have any other questions? I know we're a little long on time.
I think that was it.
Okay.
If anybody else has any closing remarks they want to share, but I feel like my information absorption was pretty high, so.
Well, I want to thank all of you, Juliana, Nicole, Helena, for joining us this evening. It's been fantastic having you on the webinar. We very much appreciate you making the time, especially on a Monday evening, because as I said before, we know your time is valuable and tight. So I know everyone on the call has appreciated it. We kept people here long, which is always a good sign. They're interested in what you had to say and they appreciate it. So after this webinar, you all will receive in the next couple of days a recording of this webinar so that you can watch it with your family, friends, and share it as needed. You're also going to get the PDF business guide of some of the top tips that have come up in this webinar and some of the best how-to practices shared by Helena, Nicole, and Juliana as well. So thank you all for taking the time to be on the call in this webinar tonight. We appreciate you joining us, and we hope you join us for the next one in the STRIDER Professional Development Series. Thanks, everyone.